Live from Jerusalem, we have breaking archaeological news, massive news from the heart of it all, from the city of David. But here's the question. Does this game-changing discovery prove or disprove the biblical narrative? Welcome to the Can I Trust the Bible live stream. I'm Raj Nair here in San Diego, and on your screen, you will see my dear friend, Franny Waisman, Israeli tour guide and all-around legend. Franny, shalom. How you doing?
Hi, Raj. It's so good to see you.
It's
I
so good to
mean,
see you. We used to hang
yeah, we're
out.
doing good.
It's been too long. I need to get back to the land, but we have a breaking archaeological discovery to discuss. So before we get into does it prove or disprove the Bible, can you just tell us what did they find in the city of David?
Okay, this is incredible. I will say, I'm gonna like build it up a little bit. For the past 150 years, we've been digging in the city of David and trying to find the northern fortifications of the city. Because the city of David is adjacent to Mount Moriah. Essentially, it's like part of the slope. And we have literally just uncovered the most insane moat that was a fortification moat that was dug out. And I mean, it's magnificent. There's no other word to describe it. Um,
Sorry.
yeah, no, I kind of want to explain a little bit. Can I, do I have the,
Please do.
yeah.
Please do.
Okay. So I want to show you guys a picture of what the city of David would have looked like 3,000 years ago. We're talking about Jebusite city, Canaanite city, when David conquers and literally changes history forever by creating the first united capital of the people of Israel in Jerusalem and pretty much creating Jerusalem. So this is what it would have looked like. Okay, we're talking about a very fortified city on and right next to Mount Moriah, which is up here. Now, this city is literally impossible to conquer because you have to pretty much hike up a cliff to get there. However, it's always been a question because Mount Moriah is actually taller than it. And so we wondered how it would be seemingly very easy to conquer if you just came from the north higher up and conquered the city. So for really 150 years, we've been looking like what on earth happened there? Why wasn't it easier? Because when you read the biblical text, it seems like it's a very challenging thing. I mean, Joshua comes into the land, conquers majority of the land of Israel, doesn't conquer the Jebusite city of what will be Jerusalem. And we've just uncovered a moat. Now, just to like let you understand the magnitude of this structure, it's about almost 100 feet wide and about 25 feet deep, dug straight into 90-degree perpendicular rock. Like it's massive. And pretty much what it would have done is sliced the mountain in two. If you can imagine a huge moat just like dug into the rock, about 30 feet cliff between Mount Moriah and the city of David. That's pretty much what we're talking about. And it's incredible. We're all very, very excited about it.
That is absolutely fascinating. I love when you said, "Can I build it up?" The answer is absolutely. We're going to get into the question of does this prove or disprove the biblical story? But one little note, which is no one is a better tour guide in Israel than Franny. Franny will take people and they'll be like, "Okay, we're here to see this thing," and within minutes they're just like grasped, like hanging on every word that you're saying. You build things up in the most brilliant way, and we'll geek out about more biblical archaeology besides this recent discovery in a second. But does this moat prove or somehow disprove the biblical narrative?
It's a great question, and obviously one that we all really care about as guides in the area. Everything that we unearth, we're like, okay, how does this play out with the biblical stories, which is really like one of the oldest historical documentations and spiritual documentations that we have. So the dating of this moat, drumroll, is about the ninth century BCE. So we're talking about 2,900 years ago. That's the earliest that we can date it because we found pretty much datable material on the wall itself. However, that doesn't mean it didn't exist before then, meaning absence of proof is not proof of absence. We don't really know when it was dug out. But if we do go to the 9th century BC, we're talking about the first kings of Israel, right? It's right after the Solomon period. So it doesn't, honestly, I'll tell you the truth is this, it doesn't really make sense that it would start then, because Solomon, as we know, builds the temple. And why on earth would he dig a massive moat, fortification? This is definitely for security reasons. Why would he build that and divide his city in two between the Temple Mount area? And I would say we'd call it like the Acropolis of Jerusalem. You have the Temple Mount, you have all the palaces that are kind of right outside those southern steps that we tour around in. And then you have the lower city, right, where the city of David is. So why would he do that? Essentially dividing his own city, which means that logically speaking, it most likely is a lot earlier. Now, I can't tell you that that dates earlier, but it very well could be that since it was in use until the middle of the Hellenistic time period, right? We're talking about Second Temple, and then they filled it in. That means that there must have been, a good reason to start it. So I personally would say that this could actually shed light into the David story. When David gets to the Jebusite city and they're like, wow, this is going to be a crazy thing to conquer. It would only be a crazy thing to conquer if there was a massive 30-foot moat dividing it from the only weak spot of the city. And in fact, it's interesting because the passages in Samuel 2, chapter 5, from like verse 6 and on, when it talks about conquering the city, right, where he goes up in the tunnels and conquers it, right after he does, it says that he builds up the city from the Milo until his temple. And the word Milo, if you read it in English, it'll just say Milo. It doesn't have a translation. But the word Milo, as I could maybe propose, and again, I'm not an archaeologist, and I totally battled it out with the archaeologists because they're much more science, and until it says Milo on it, we're not going to call it that. But perhaps the word Milo, which means to fill, okay, maybe there was something that needed to be filled from that northern part that David is building up through from there until his palace. Who knows? Meaning this discovery definitely does not go against the biblical story. It only paints a picture of how much more challenging it must have been to conquer the city. And let's just say you say, Franny, you know what? You can't date that far back. Maybe it was from the Jebusite time, maybe it wasn't. I'll accept that. But if you want to just go from the 9th century BCE, we're talking about the only type of, of people that could build such a strong fortification, such a magnificent fortification that dates to the same time period as other magnificent buildings. We see a real jump in the buildings of ancient Jerusalem, whether it's the Ophel, which is that outside area right outside the Temple Mount that we pretty much say that Solomon built, or the large stone structure, or the fortresses, or just there's magnitude of building. I would say this proves that the people who are ruling in this city were a very strong government. They were a very powerful force, that they had not only the money, but the security to dig and build such monumental security. And that would just prove that for those that say, I don't know, you think of just a number of years ago, people were asking, well, listen, Franny, like, David never really existed because you can't really prove that scientifically. And that was I guess what the consensus of some of the academic world was. This is just a biblical figure that all of you crazy Bible lovers believe in, but he's not proven. And then suddenly you have proof of David, evidence with the House of David inscription, where suddenly you have the defeat of a king from the House of David, and boom, science proves David. And now the questions are, okay. It is indisputable that David existed. No archaeologists of any, they all believe this is a figure that actually existed. But the questions are, wait a second. Well, how big was this kingdom of David? How powerful were they? Were they a really strong government? Were they really uniting and I guess ruling in this region as a real force? Or were they some like small Bedouin tribe in the middle of nowhere? When you look at this type of buildings, you would say, well, the first kings of the House of David were absolutely not a small Bedouin tribe. They were a force to be dealt with. And that really does fit the biblical narrative so beautifully.
Wow, wow. I love the way that, God works. It's like if a skeptic or an atheist says this doesn't exist, it's like, okay, give the Israel Antiquity Authority like 5, 10 years and then have that conversation. And I love the way that Zev Orenstein, who is the director of international affairs, correct me if I'm wrong, at the
Yes.
City of David, he
Yes,
says it's no longer a matter of faith, but a matter of fact. These people existed. They existed here. And even to your point,
absolutely.
to tell Dan Stelly, basically said, here's proof that David existed. But to your point, we don't know how big his kingdom is or how powerful he was. And now this moat, not only does it prove, the archaeological fortifications around Jerusalem, but it goes to emphasize that it was a powerful kingdom. So you almost have to look, you have to look at it from a multitude of different angles where it's like, yes, it's proving this one thing, but it's also proving this thing through the back door. And I think that's what's so interesting is you're finding all of these things in the city of David that might be kind of confusing to an outside audience. Like, for example, this is one thing I want to talk about. You guys found these Phoenician capitals in the city of David. And to an outsider, that would be like, oh, well, that's definitely not a good thing. Why would you?
Aha, the
Yeah,
Phoenicians are there.
yeah, the Phoenicians, they're up in Lebanon. Why would there be Phoenician capitals just being kind of the tops of pillars in Jerusalem? See, that proves that there were no Israelites in the Hebrews here. That disproves the Bible. Of course, if you find, Roman or other things in the wrong time, that would suggest that these things disprove the Bible. But let's talk about those Phoenician capitals that were found in the city of David.
Yeah.
That disprove the Bible.
So it's an interesting thing. It's like, wait a second, if the Phoenicians are building on the city of David 3,000 years ago when David is supposed to be there, then David's definitely not there. But to any Bible reader, when you find Phoenician capitals in the city of David, your heart just jumps for joy because David conquers this small city. He creates Jerusalem, changes history forever. And the first thing that it writes that he does, as I actually just said, is he builds up from the Milo, maybe this massive cliff moat, to his house and he builds his palace. And I'm going to quote Samuel 2, chapter 5, passage 11 says, and Hiram, king of Tyre, Tyre being Phoenicia, sent envoys to David and cedar trees and stonemasons and carpenters, and they build a house for David. And so suddenly you're like, whoa, this is actually the politics of the time. You have this new king who essentially is the king of Jerusalem, and you have another king all the way up in Phoenicia and Tyre, and they say, let's make a pact. I'm going to build your palace. By the way, Hiram is going to have a very deep pact with the people of Jerusalem because he's also going to supply Solomon with the cedars of Lebanon, with wood, with everything that they need to build the temple. So not only David's private palace is going to be kind of refurbished with these beautiful capitals, but the temple itself will be as well. So when you find a capital, you're like, wow, David was absolutely here. And his buddy was really like, following up on what's written in the Bible and he built him a palace.
See, I'm telling you, Franny, like that's why I love hanging out with you in Jerusalem because you and I are Bible geeks. Let's continue to geek out with my friend here watching. One of the things you used to do when you used to lead our groups on the pilgrimage road that's still being excavated from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount. You did this thing the first time you did it blew my mind. I think, okay, context. I think for some people, 2000, not for some people, for anyone, 2000 years ago seems so unapproachable. It just seems like that's almost science fiction. That's so long ago. I can't contextualize 2000 years ago. So here we are on this road that's being excavated. It's an active archaeological dig. And I'm there with, Christian rappers and musicians and, football players. And here you are just blowing people's mind. But then you did this one thing. You went over to this part of the road that's still being excavated and there's dirt and mud and buckets. And you were like, this. And you pulled out this piece of dirt. People are like, all right, what's she up to? And then you have one of our guys take their arm and he took that dirt and he smeared it on their arm. And it wasn't mud, it was black soot. And you're like, see, that is DNA. That is biological evidence of the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70 AD. It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it was like a Marvel comics. Like we all just kind of fell back. It was like, wow, that is so unbelievably cool. So, as someone who's there all the time, can you give me one or two examples of things that you love to geek out about biblical archaeology in Israel?
Oh my gosh, so many. In fact, I actually want to say something about that, Ash, because I was there today with TBN Israel. And it's incredible because we're almost like not done, but we've dug a lot. And this ash doesn't ever end. I always know that if I go there, I will always find ash everywhere. Like it's not like, oh, she had the secret spot where all the ash is. That was like the only spot that was burned. The entire city was burned. And I remember just like I try as a guide to paint it. Like you say, it's so untouchable. And you're walking on this road, and I say, listen, if you're Christian, imagine the times of Paul, right? Like people are walking in their robes and they're going up to the temple and there's talking and I paint it pretty well, but still, you're like, okay, I'm on a 2000. You're like, it's amazing. But what's incredible is that every single person that walks in that spot, and this is I literally every time I'm there, I think this is wow, just by seeing the magnitude of the archaeology. The archaeology, like I don't really have to paint it because you see the road, you're on it, it's magnificent. But then when I put the ash, what's cool about the ash is this. When you actually see all of this archaeology, you're seeing essentially a dead Jerusalem,
Mm.
meaning you're seeing a hollowed out like skeleton. It's not really what Jerusalem was because what is Jerusalem? Jerusalem is what makes that life. Like the people, the food, the clothes, the smells, that stuff burns. Stones don't burn. So you have this like an exoskeleton that's like holding. And to really bring it to life, when I pull out ash and put it on your hand, that's Jerusalem.
Come
And
on.
we kind of get used to it. Like we're like, oh, cool, archaeology. And when you see that, you're like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. This isn't just archaeology. This is actually calling me as a visitor and all of us. When we see things like this unearthed, it's reminding us that just as these people lived here and they were doing their history, but for them, history was like Abraham. They were like, oh, we found evidence of Abraham and like Isaac, right? It's like David hanging out, like, oh, Mount Moriah. Maybe Abraham was right here trying to figure that out. Probably not as much. They weren't as privileged as we are today with time. They had like wars all the time, but not that we don't. Anywho, um, we're all part of this story. For me, the geeking out is like, I find seals. Like for me, one of my favorites is actually the seals that we find in the area of King David's palace. Because you have these seals and just the story is incredible. Not Kathleen Kennan, Eilat Mazar in 2005 is digging there, and she knows she's in the palace because we had that really nice Phoenician capital, and she's looking and she unearths like a seal with a name, a biblical name, right? That says Gemariah, son of Shaphan, and Gedaliah, son of Pashur, and Juchal, son of Shalmiah. And these are names that like most people don't even know about, but you're like, oh my gosh, it's not one, it's not two, it's three names in like a vicinity, a very close vicinity. Well, Gamariah was a little bit farther, but in the same little area. And these are all the top officers of the last king of Israel. And you find their names literally sealed right next to each other thousands of years later. And their message could not be more relevant to us today. That's my geek out. I'm like, oh my God, thousands of year old seals, and they're
Oh,
biblical seals who just didn't want to listen to the prophet saying, if we don't figure out how to stay close to our spiritual life,
mm.
to being good to each other, to social justice, to God justice, to not, murder people. We don't, hopefully all of us are not murderers, but there are ways to kill without actually physically murdering. We slander people. We're all over the place. You look at just the news and it breaks your heart. If we don't figure it out, it will lead to destruction.
Mm.
And no one wanted to listen to that.
Right.
No one wanted to listen to that. So that's like those are really, really big spots that that I get really excited about.
That's so cool, Franny. All right, let me ask you a question because you brought up the word justice. When you see all of these archaeological discoveries validating not even just the Second Temple times, but the First Temple times, and the Tel Dan Stele, and all these things where it's just like the land is littered with archaeological. I mean, literally, you trip over it. Literally
Yeah.
trip over archaeological evidence of the kingdoms of Israel, of even the time of the judges. You go to Shiloh. What do you hear, or what do you think when you hear someone call Jewish people, I don't know how else to put it. I'm just going to use their words: colonizers,
Occupiers.
occupiers of the land of Israel. Exactly.
I mean, part of me it wows me because like you're really sticking to your story. You know what I mean? It's incredible. It's incredible to me to have an ideology, and it's really a political ideology more than a scientific one, but a political ideology that is so strong that no matter how much scientific evidence is thrown at that, they just don't want to budge. And to me, it actually reinforces things because I am a believing, Jewish woman. To me, the biblical scripture isn't just, a history book. Like some tour guides, for me, it's my spiritual book as well. And when I see prophecies of the end of times when people will be denying the truth, and I go, all right, well, I guess I'm on the right side of this. To me, it actually strengthens me to spread like the truth. And I do take quite a bunch of people who specifically want to come to Judea and Samaria and really like see what was there. And they can say, well, wait a second, you're from Tennessee. You can't just cut. Yeah, fine. There was like biblical people here at some point, but you're from Tennessee. You're not indigenous to this place. They say, yeah, but I'm a Jew. And and you can only be a Jew if you were once at some point from Judea. That's literally why we're called Jews. It's actually a term that we were never really called unless I was from specifically the tribe of Judah. But but in exile, there's no more Judea, so we kind of just become Jews. Now, you could say, well, wait a second, like, how do I know the Jews of today and the Jews of then? Now you have so much forensic evidence. Like, let's say you do a 23andMe and you're Jewish. And I say, well, maybe my grandma on my dad's side was from Poland, and who knows where her grandma was from. It'll say, you know, European Jew or Polish Jew. And then there's like an asterisk that says, it's like the same genetic makeup of Jews from the Middle East. It's the same genetic makeup of a Moroccan Jew and of a Yemenite Jew. It's not, it doesn't say Polish, it doesn't say like Italian. It says Polish Jew, Italian Jew, meaning I can kind of know where the last stop on the exile was. But in the end, that DNA actually traces back to our inheritance, to the beginnings of when we started here. And then if you forget just the technical DNA, I'm going to go to the spiritual DNA. I am a remnant of the Jewish people who are strong enough to survive and pass down this tradition, the same tradition that people in Jerusalem were still practicing. There's an inscription that I actually took one of my sons to see. He was then 9. And it's an inscription that is literally it was on the top of the temple, the second temple, and it's still there to this day. And it's written in Hebrew, and it actually talks about that being the spot, the corner, the southwestern corner of the temple. And it's this massive chunk that the Romans pushed over, and it says on it, the house of the trumpeter. Maybe to differentiate between Sabbath and regular days. And that's where the Levite would stand. And every Sabbath on Friday afternoon, before the Sabbath would come in, would blow the trumpet and welcome the Sabbath in. And I had my 9-year-old son read it. He knows Hebrew, he's Israeli. And he's reading it and he understands it. And he also understands what Shabbat is, what the Sabbath is, because he keeps it. And I said, Yotam, his name is Yotam, which is the name of one of the kings of Judah. And it's the name of one of the sons of Gideon. And very strong Judean name. I said, Yotam, you're 9 and you were reading this inscription. Do you know that this inscription is 2,000 years old? and his eyes couldn't hold that number. And I said, can you find me any other little 9-year-old boys who can read and understand the writings of their ancestors? And he was 9, so he couldn't answer that. And I said, and not only that, the people who inscribed this, they also had the name Yotam, and they also kept the Sabbath that you keep, and they kept the holidays that you keep, and they read from the same books that you read from, because we have 2,000-year-old scripture that is the same as the Bible that we read today. And to me, all those people that are like, they want to throw out these words like you're occupying, you're this is the only indigenous story of indigenous people who were kicked out and exiled and successfully not only returned to their homeland, but created one of the most impressive countries in the world. One that really maybe makes some people mad. It's so impressive, which is why it's such a focus. But it's an incredible once in a lifetime story. And the biblical archaeology just reinforces it.
Wow. That gave me goosebumps, Franny. The way you're able to not only just reveal things, but show that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob keeps his covenants. He keeps his promises against all reason, against and the fact that, like you said, it's the same people group reading the same book, worshiping the same God on the same hill, speaking the same language. I can barely understand Shakespeare, and that's 500 years ago, let alone, English from however many, 500 AD. Who knows if that's even, something you can even read. But, I think what's really important for us to understand about the complexities of the area is I've been reading in 1st and 2nd Samuel the past couple of weeks. And everything about 1st and 2nd Samuel happens in Judea and Samaria. I mean, it's in, David becomes king in Hebron. The tabernacle was in Shiloh. These are all names of things that are in Judea and Samaria. And I'll tell you what, we're going to have you back and again, because the way you're able to connect the tangible and the spiritual is just second to none. But I do want to leave you with a couple verses. This was in my reading this morning, and God's like, read this out loud. I was like, okay. This is in 2 Samuel chapter 22. I'm just going to read 2 verses or 2 or 3 verses, but I love who you are. I love what you do. I know you have 5 kids and that your husband's in the army right now. And so I just want this to encourage you, because I know it's a crazy, chaotic time for you. But it says, the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge. Wow, I'm not getting emotional. Holy moly. My shield and the horn of my salvation. He is my stronghold, my refuge, and my savior. From violent people you will save me. And then 2 more verses. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. So in closing, last question, Franny, how can my friends here that are watching be praying for you?
Just pray. I mean, I'll share what I pray, and if we can amplify it, it would be amazing. Pray that our leadership keeps the people in mind. And pray that Israel stays strong and has the right strength to be who we are unapologetically, against a lot of the world who really, really want to see us end. That we stay strong into our identity, to our connection with each other. There's unity, and that all of our soldiers come home safely, all of our hostages come home safely, and that we get to see a real light come from this promised land to the world, hopefully speedily in our days, and just an end to all evil.
Well, Franny, toda raba. Love you so much. God bless, my friend. Hey, I'm Raj Nair. Thank you for watching the Can I Trust the Bible YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you compelling evidence to trust in the validity of the Bible. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And ask your questions in the comments and share the video with your friends and skeptics. Thanks for watching.